change towards applying total quality management, to what extent do you think it's important to apply the control procedures? And the second question is, how can we synchronize re-engineering with TQM? Thank you.
Well, let me take the second question first, re-engineering. Re-engineering is basically a process where we're going to apply significant amounts of resources to significantly change a process. Re-engineering, it really involves sometimes getting outside consultants in to make sure you've got the latest technology. So it's really a crash program, usually done by senior management with the assistance of the rest of the corporation. So when you talk about TQM, anytime you talk about anything, TQM or re-engineering, you're going through organizational change. And when you go through organizational change, you're going to have mental model problems, and you're going to have communication problems and so forth. So all of these things are additional arrows in our quiver to make sure that we get the most effective change processes going in our companies.
In organizations that require significant change, I would first do in re-engineering, in essence, and fundamentally realign what needs to be done, followed then by incremental approaches such as total quality management to do more fine-tuning. In regards to your second question, as far as if you're referring to control charts and the like, control charts are nice, they're pretty, but for the most part they are done at the end of a production process. There are more fundamental and more powerful tools such as quality function deployment and design of experiments that might be better to be done first.
Gracias, doctor. Escuchemos ahora una llamada telefónica que proviene del Instituto
This
Nacional
question
de
is coming via phone,
Capacitación
and it's coming
y
from
Telecomunicaciones.
Lima, Peru, the National Institute, Telecommunications, Research and Training.
Saludos, San Diego.
Greetings to San Diego.
Tenemos acá
We have a question to ask
La
you.
primera es,
First one is,
¿cómo lograr la creatividad?
how are we going to achieve creativity in the worker who is in a vertical type organization? And another question that we have is, how can we increment the process?
Se requiere necesariamente
And do we necessarily require a high-level management committee, and do we need an external support? Thank you.
Well, let me deal with the creativity question. And that is, how do you actually promote creativity in a company? And of course, the first thing you have to do is you have to provide time for that creativity. Plus the fact you also have to have a common explanation and a statement of what the problem is, and get the right people to really think about it. You want to take the second one?
As far as what you have to have is senior management involvement in terms of the process. If you don't have senior management involvement and commitment to really be making some fairly fundamental changes and putting rather significant resources behind it, your organizational change effort is not going to be very successful. In many cases, in regards to your other question, is that external resources are brought in, either in terms of providing generic training to senior management, in terms of consulting, in essence, to senior management on implementation, and again, more generic training as far as the rest of the employees are concerned.
Muchas gracias. Y ahora de Perú nos vamos a México nuevamente, el Instituto Tecnológico de Zacatepec.
And now we go back to Mexico, Zacatepec. Good afternoon, good morning.
Instituto Tecnológico de Acapulco.
We are calling from Acapulco.
Mire, habla el licenciado Honorio Doroteo Gutiérrez del Instituto
I am calling from the Instituto Tecnológico de Acapulco, Mexico. And the question is, when we change a mental model, what is the balance that we should achieve between the salary of the worker and the vision of the organization?
The salary of the worker and the vision of the organization. Salaries, to me, we talk about, as soon as we make a positive change to a company, we have to talk about salary increases. And really, what has been proven in our country ever so many times is that really workers are really looking beyond not just basically salary. They are motivated by recognition and a lot of other factors that we have not done as good a job as we might on. So really, once we get the corporation that really is coming up and really is doing extremely well, then we ought to talk about incentive systems. But to really put that issue on the front line before change is made, there are other more important issues with many of our workers that can be satisfied without getting into the salary issue on the front end.
To my mind, the first thing what one needs to have a good salary structure is a good measurement system. You have to develop the good measurement system first as part of your re-engineering or systems thinking effort. Only after that can you start asking questions as far as what kind of salary structure one should be having.
Nos vamos ahora al Brasil, en Río de Janeiro.
And now we're going to Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, KTV Comunicações do Brasil.
Okay.
Adelante, Brasil.
Hello?
Sí,
Aló.
le escuchamos.
Okay. The question we have here is the following.
La pregunta es la siguiente. El proceso de reducción de las empresas que están afectando a las empresas en Brasil indican que están reduciendo la
The loyalty and contribution of the employees to the company. How can we reconcile these negative actions with the objective for a continuous improvement towards the quality?
It seems like the issue on the table here is, given some negative actions that have been taken by some theoretical company, how can we really motivate our employees to contribute to continuous improvement? And I think these things are dealt in Senge's book, that really we have to understand personal improvement. What does the employee really want? To spend the time and find out that if this were a perfect world, what do we have to do to improve his capabilities? We want to have an organization. Organizational learning comes from individual learning. So we have to understand things like this, which would be very helpful to motivate the employee to start continuing to continuous improvement. His career is pretty much depending upon the security of the company. So somehow we have to make sure that he understands this and can contribute.
To my mind, employees are going to have to realize that in most organizations now, their jobs are not permanent, and that they basically own their own companies, even though they work for someone else. And if they have that change in orientation, being laid off is not going to be that much of a personal concern. That's very different from how most organizations operate.
Escuchemos ahora una llamada de la Comisión Federal de Electricidad, Auditorio Rodano, México, Distrito Federal.
And we're going to Mexico.
¿México?
Bueno,
Escuchamos.
Okay.
Por favor, formule su pregunta.
y buenos días. Mire,
Good morning.
llamamos de la Comisión Federal de
We're calling
Electricidad
from the Federal Commission of Electricity
en la ciudad de
in Oaxaca, Mexico.
¿Sí?
Sí, sigue.
Bueno, la primera pregunta es ¿cómo
This is
podemos
coming from
lograr
Oaxaca.
crear
How can we really
condiciones de
create
motivación
conditions that would
para un verdadero interés en la
foster
capacitación por parte
motivation
de los mandos
in
medios?
developing
La segunda
professional
pregunta que
development
tenemos es ¿qué nos
in
recomiendan
intermediate
para
levels
lograr que las personas se
and
decidan
how
a
can
actuar?
what can we do
Básicamente, el problema no es
to
el
encourage people to act, because basically it's just inertia and resistance to change in people. How can we motivate them to really do things about implementing these things toward total quality?
I think, it gets right down fundamentally to what is an organization. What does it really consist of? And I think, as Dave pointed out before, it's got certain systems and so forth. And I think the leaders of our organizations, if we really want to develop a learning organization, one that really motivates the employees, we have to review some of the existing policies and practices and incentive programs and so forth that we have in. How do we support the learning process? Are we sending our people, are we supporting them to go back to school to become more valuable? And I think that if we start putting those kind of things in place, and we have the leadership that really shows that we are going to become a learning organization, we accept truth, we accept people who don't necessarily agree with some of the things we've done, then we will develop this and we will have people who are motivated to contribute.
La siguiente pregunta la formulan desde el Instituto Tecnológico de Saltillo, Coahuila, México.
It's coming from Coahuila, Mexico.
Sí, lo escuchamos.
Quisiera saber, sabiendo
I would
que
like to
el
know,
cambio de estructuras mentales
the change of mental models is fundamental in learning and in all the paradigms that we are learning in this program, in this series of programs. we would like to know what, if there are any pre-established strategies that will induce to that will lead to a mental model change that is so much needed. In another, also, I would like to recommend something on those graphs 22 and 26 that we have received in the manual. You have the term, the secondary term, and I think it should be sequential. I think there is a typo there. So I would like to recommend that you revise those and be a little more careful in editing and translating the material in order to make it more comprehensible, more understandable for us as the material that we are being imparted. Thank you.
So,
I have no comment.
¿No comentarios? No hay comentarios al respecto. Y continuamos con esta sesión de preguntas.
And now we have a question and answer session. And now we have another question coming from Technological Institute Coatabambo in Sonora. Sonora, Mexico. Considering that there are many economic changes in the world today, what place do we have the development of proprietary technology? Because, for instance, in Mexico, we're not known for exporting that sort of innovation. So how do we see that in the total quality framework and the systems thinking?
Proprietary knowledge, I know of several cases down in Mexico, particularly in the steel industry. They have come up with some very good proprietary technology. The protections that they have on that are very similar to the protections we have in our companies as far as proprietary knowledge. I don't see where that would be any particular problem. There's joint ventures, there's all kinds of legal agreements, there's royalties and so forth that can still protect the Mexico interests in any proprietary knowledge that they come up with.
I think in essence you're talking really about a sequential strategy. Probably one of the strategies most Mexican organizations are pursuing is to be one of the lower cost producers in the world. And that isn't really so much for proprietary technology, that's for generic, generally available technology. Once organizations become proficient in this, then perhaps the next step is to become into more specialized expertise that requires a higher level of capability on the organizations that they can build on.
Another question is coming via phone from Panama. Good afternoon. The question is as follows. How can we convince people who are in key positions in the company about the need to learn, to get training in everything that has to do with total quality management for the organization?
Well, these organizational change programs, the motivation for the change has to come from the top. And really the CEO or the plant manager, whoever wants to implement programs like this, has to get people in to train his report twos, of what this all means, and then work it out with them whether or not we're going to go ahead and implement it. But he has to get a commitment, but he has to show the leadership role.
I agree.
One more question coming from Mexico Autonomous University, and this is coming via phone, Cuautitlán, Mexico. Thank you. What would be the parameters or the concrete indicators that would enable us to tell whether or not we are at a time of an adequate change, or not just going with a fad or some kind of trend that could be negative?
One of the things that's happened with many of our companies into TQM programs for over 10 years, and they look upon these programs as phases. This is what we hope to accomplish this year, and then next year we're going to work in the customer area, and the next year the goal is going to be this. But what we have developed over these last couple of years is the importance of surveys. And there are surveys that are given to employees. And they're very excellent surveys, maybe 25 or 30 multiple choice questions. So you can get feedback from your stakeholders, your suppliers if you're into that situation, on a phase program and so forth, just exactly how successful you have been. An important survey also is from your customers. Have they noticed the change? What have they seen? Has our response time improved and so forth? It's as important to understand the good things as it is to understand the bad things.
For certain, I think that there needs to be some kind of external assessment that needs to be made, in essence, to find out if indeed you're simply just, as you say, following the latest fad, or frankly, need a significant or rapid change in your organization.
Now we have one question from the Technological Institute from Villahermosa, Tabasco, Mexico.
Siga, Tabasco.
Buenos días.
Buenos días.
La pregunta que queremos hacer es,
The question is, in what way
¿a qué nivel se
and
puede llegar
at
a
what
los
level
trabajadores
can we
con modelos
reach the workers with these models, particularly when they're resistant to change?
We start these kind of change programs, and after people understand basically what's going on, and we've provided them with tools and techniques, maybe SPC, whatever it might be, then we set up teams. Now, when we start setting up teams, we are going to get the workers involved, and we probably will have to facilitate those teams. I would assume that many of the teams, particularly when they're put on very significant company problems, that they are going to be exposed to a lot of training, and they also will probably need some facilitators that will help them along the whole process. And also with the understanding that these are not coffee meetings. These are meetings where the company has set aside time and we expect to see positive contributions to the company.
To my mind, is the management needs to do two things. One, they need to change systems. And those systems need to be quite visible in terms of what actual changes management is making. The second is that management must, to use an American expression, walk the talk. That is, they have to be able to demonstrate changed behavior on their part. Only by doing both of these will employees become convinced that management is quite serious about whatever kind of organizational change you're contemplating.
Atendemos ahora la llamada de Puerto Vallarta, Jalisco, de la Universidad de Guadalajara.
This question is coming from Guadalajara.
Bienvenidos. Puerto Vallarta.
No question.
Vamos a
Se perdió la pregunta.
cambiar la fuente de la llamada. Tenemos
We
otra
have
que nos
another
viene
question
de la Universidad
from
Nacional
the
Autónoma de
National
México,
University,
Universidad
Mexico,
Hispanoamericana,
Hispano-American.
Estado de México. Adelante.
Let's see, the question is, our university in Mexico recognizes and congratulates the University of San Diego, and we have a question. The systems focus or thinking and change focus, how can we apply it to medium-sized and small enterprises in recessionary economies where technology is only very rudimentary, as is the case of many countries in Latin America and in Mexico in particular? We are aware of that.
90% of the organizations in the United States, and we could be talking 500,000 organizations, are less than 100 people. While we're talking about basics here, the things that we talk about have to be scaled down in resources and also perhaps in time. But the basic procedures are the same. The leadership by the plant manager or the owner, the entrepreneur of the organization is very key. And the use of some kind of intervention means, whatever is best for that company. Our program has to be laid out in time, time has to be provided, people have to be trained, and of course we have to survey and measure the results of what we're doing.
And I would say, indeed, that it actually would be easier for small and medium-sized organizations to do this. They don't have as much a chain of command as to go to as large organizations do.
Retornamos ahora a Suramérica, nos vamos nuevamente a México. Estamos ahora en otra de las ciudades principales que
We're
forman parte
in
de esta
another one of the main cities this is the Autonomous University in Baja California Sur, in La Paz.
Adelante. Bueno, parece que tampoco se
Uh-oh, the call is not coming in.
Escuchamos Baja California.
Sí, bueno.
Oh, okay, they are on the line.
La extensión universitaria de Comondú, que pregunta, posterior a la capacitación de directivos.
After the training of the leadership and the rest of the personnel of a business, how much time do you think we need to expect to change, and how can we correct problems, and when can we see results in total quality management, a time frame?
Well, it'd be very useful if we could talk about a specific organization. But training programs, of course, let me describe the training programs we've used in the state of California. These training programs probably take around 26 weeks. And usually we're talking about training perhaps 25 to 30 people in a room. And we cover such things as communications, TQM overview, problem solving, and so forth. Right after the training program is completed, then we start with a very pragmatic scene of setting up teams. And people know which task they're going to be on. I have seen results from these training programs occur in about 5 or 6 months. That really we put this team on a problem, they solve the problem. We can, with industrial engineers and so forth, point out what the annual savings of this kind of thing are going to be, you know. So really, it really depends upon the company, but it's done, as I said before, on a plant-by-plant basis, you know, and it really takes the leadership of the plant to come up with the logistics as also the rollout plan for TQM.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chaudron and Mr. Wolf. We hope that you have enjoyed this video conference. We will continue transmitting programs on the latest in management techniques and systems and global competitiveness. We invite you to participate on February 29 on the next program of our series, Strategies for Global Competitiveness, which is entitled Managing Groups and Diversity, Consensus Building and Empowerment. We also hope you will join us on May 23rd for the first program of our series, International Negotiation and Conflict, New Resolution Strategies and Techniques. For additional information on the International Training Center's programs, please consult your participant manuals, in which you will find the dates and specific topics of this year's programs. On behalf of all of us who collaborate with the International Training Center, I thank you for your participation and interest in today's program. Thank you very much, and see you soon.